The Bible is a big book with 1,189 chapters, but its key message doesn't require too much time or effort to understand. Unfortunately, though, the Bible's foundational message, the gospel, is often neglected or distorted, which is tragic because if you miss the gospel, you will miss God. So in this video, I want to share how this actually happened to me, and then take you to John chapter 3, verse 16, to spend a few minutes on what the gospel truly is. My name is Aaron Massey, and I've been teaching the Bible and following Jesus for more than 15 years. In fact, he completely transformed my life in November of 2008. Before that, I thought I was a Christian, but the gospel actually wasn't real or clear to me, and I had missed Jesus. As a junior in high school, though, I began going to church with my girlfriend at the time, and then by the beginning of 2008, which was spring of my junior year, I started thinking about God quite a bit. When summer rolled around, I inserted prayer into my life, and I prayed a lot at that time, and here's why. I was a competitive golfer, and it was my last summer as a junior amateur to garner some success and get the attention of college programs. Succeeding meant a lot to me, and so I was asking God a lot for help. The memory that really stands out to me is from a golf tournament that summer. I was struggling through every round. In the middle of the tournament, I was just getting angry with God because my swing was so far off compared to where it had been earlier that spring, and because it seemed like I couldn't actually get a break. I'd be out of bounds by like a foot, and then putt after putt after putt kept lipping out of the hole. It was a terrible tournament. But in the middle of my praying and my frustration, something dawned on me. I had watched The P Word a week or two before that tournament. And this is what I concluded, that God was punishing me for disobeying him by making me play so poorly. And that conclusion, that reasoning, shows how I had misunderstood the gospel and that I was missing God before that November. Now, first, as a disclaimer, I'm not saying that the P word is okay, and I'm not saying that God doesn't sometimes use failure to get our attention about certain areas of our lives. But here's how I was off. At that time, my relationship with God was only about me obeying his moral commands so that he could give me what I want. I thought if I pacified God by keeping his rules, he would let me be successful, happy, and triumphant in my goals in life. If I scratched God's back, he would scratch mine. I misunderstood the gospel, so I misunderstood the Bible, which caused me ultimately to miss God. And I was off, in fact, in these three ways. One, by thinking that our relationship with God is more like an impersonal business contract rather than a marriage. Two, by thinking that I can perform for God in order for him to give me what I want. Three, by thinking he only wants to support my goals in life rather than transform my goals in life. You'll see these themes come out as we look at John chapter 3, verse 16. This verse contains a statement from Jesus about why he came, which he gave in a midnight conversation with an inquisitive Jewish leader named Nicodemus. Jesus said, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life." Now here are some key points that I want to draw out. First, the gospel starts with God, and it's about him loving the world that he made. His love for that world is significant because that world has made itself unlovable in its refusal to have God. Even though we are his special creation, we are off and we're all messed up, and we cannot fix ourselves. But God's love triumphs over our rejection of him. Now, his reason for creating us is to have a relationship with us, and it was his love that overcame our rebellion to help make that possible. God is not interested in a contract with us, but a vibrant, joy-filled relationship that's more like a marriage. He wants that for each one of us personally, especially you. We can't do something to make that happen, though. He has to do something, and Jesus describes it as God giving his one and only Son. The Son, of course, refers to Jesus, who is God in the flesh. And here's what that means. The Father gave His Son in order for the Son to show us who God is, what God is like, and what God says. And ultimately, that giving of the Son means that God gave His Son over to death so that Jesus may take the punishment for our wrongs. The goal is that we might be forgiven and freed to enjoy God in that marriage-like relationship. After dying, then, Jesus rose from the dead, proving all that He had said and securing all that He promises. The gospel centers on the life and death of Jesus. That's how God gave the Son, and that touches on my second misconception. It's not about what we can do for God, but about what God has done for us. I treated the gospel as a rule book for manipulating God to give me what I want. But there's no love in that. And I miss the fact that I am fallen and corrupt, and that my biggest need is salvation and redemption, restoration and renewal that only God can give. The gospel is not about what we can do for God, but about what God has done for us. Yet, just because the gospel centers on what God has done for us doesn't mean there's no action for us to take. The gospel concludes with an invitation from God to respond to Jesus' achievements for us. Jesus said the Father gave the Son so that whoever trusts or believes in the Son may not perish but have eternal life. The response is turning to the Son with trust. It's saying, Jesus, you are God. You are my Redeemer. Forgive me, heal me, save me. Take me for yourself and keep me for yourself. It's turning from our godless path so that we might be with God and be like God. First and foremost, the goal of the gospel is to do life with God. And then as an outflow of that relationship, God renews our character and our behavior, our heart and our mind and our habits. So the gospel is all about relationship first, transformation second. And I originally thought that our connection with God was nothing more than a contract that focused on our outward behavior. But the gospel is about a relationship that produces inward transformation, which is why my addiction to the P word kept going until I actually approached God by faith and opened myself up to Him to change me from the inside out. I needed Him to take away that addiction from me, but I didn't know that I needed Him to take it away. I wasn't searching for it. But when I turned to Him for a real relationship, He changed my heart and took away what was so destructive to me. So the gospel is about God, God's love for us, God's achievements for us in Jesus, and then us having a thriving relationship with God by faith. But there was one last thing that I missed. I hung on to my life's goals and ambitions as though this life belonged to me. Jesus said the result of trusting in Him is that we may not perish, but have eternal life. To perish is the fruit of life without God. It's dissatisfaction and misery in this life that results in conscious agony away from the presence of God forever in eternity. But eternal life is the opposite. It kickstarts with an increased awareness of God and a nearness to Him that leads to profound strength and peace and joy and wisdom in this life, today. Eternal life leads us to live on mission for God in this life, and it culminates with perfect bliss in the next life. Having eternal life shapes how we develop our own goals and ambitions right now. That summer in 2008, my success in golf was all about me and what I could get out of it and what I could earn from it. But having eternal life with God naturally leads to a life that's all about honoring God and pointing to the goodness and greatness of Him. Of course, I still could have served God and honored God as a competitive golfer, but Jesus took that desire away from me and put me on a different path. So that, my friends, is a brief summary of how the gospel changed my life. John chapter 3, verse 16 is a wonderful place to start to understand what Jesus is all about. When that became clear to me, my takeaway was this: the gospel is all about doing life with God. The gospel is not about doing life for God so that God will give you success as you do your own thing without Him. No, The gospel is about what Jesus accomplished for us in his death and resurrection so that we can be connected to God. Well, that's it for this video. If you heard something that was helpful, be sure to like and subscribe so that more people can find teaching just like this. My name is Aaron Massey. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.